The question is, that this bill be now read a second time? I call the member for Newtown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Greens to address the Transport Administration Amendment Authority to Close Railway Lines Bill 2016, as I have carried the transport issues in this place for the Greens. As the Greens transport spokesperson, Dr Marine Faruqi, made clear in the other place, the Greens strongly oppose this bill, and I think it is pretty clear what the agenda of this bill is when we see that it was actually introduced in the other place by the Minister for Roads, as opposed to being introduced in this House by the Minister for Transport, because this is about an agenda which seeks to prioritise 1950s roads and prioritise the idea of shutting down public transport and effective public transport and heavy rail solutions in our state. This bill seeks to give an expansion of powers to the Minister for Transport by providing the Minister with unchecked power to then close any railway line in the Greater Sydney, Newcastle and Wollongong regions, from Port Stephens to Kiama and in the Blue Mountains and the Hawkesbury regions, for the purposes of or in connection with development declared to be state infrastructure. This order would need to simply be published in the Government Gazette to take full effect and would not be reviewable in this House or the other place, as is currently the case. And there is nothing in this bill to actually allow a disallowance by the Parliament of these decisions that would be made. The current section 99A of the Transport Administration Act requires the government of the day to explicitly pass an Act of Parliament in order to authorise a rail infrastructure owner to close a rail line. Is the government simply trying to remove any involvement of the community or any local say in what happens? It seems to be that that's the case. It seems to be that the frustration caused to this government when they attempt to bring legislation into this place to close railway lines by a community that is opposed to the closure of railway lines, that their solution to answering this frustration, to actually dealing with what others would call democracy, which it seems this side, the government side of the House would call progress, is actually democracy. That is people having a say over what happens in this state. Apparently, and I know the member for Leighton Macquarie says it's antiquated, in the other House, the Minister for Roads actually referred to it as archaic. Apparently the concept of a community having a say over what happens in relation to their rail line is archaic. And instead we need progress, and by progress it appears that this government says that progress means cutting the community out. We've seen the community cut out of state significant infrastructure development plans, and now this is more of an attempt to cut the community out in relation to the closure of railway lines. I note that the opposition is speaking against this bill, but I think it's important, as is the case and the role of the Greens in this place, to point out that it actually was the former Labor government who attempted to introduce these reforms back in 2009 and 2010. And so while we're pleased to see that they appear to have changed their tune in opposition, we often see them changing their mind in opposition from what they attempted to do in government. And I'm pleased to note that actually that was not successful at the time, and thankfully was defeated as a result of community opposition and the strong work done by the former member of the other place, now Green Senator Lee Rhiannon, working with the community and the Liberals and Nationals at that stage to eventually defeat the Labor government's attempt to introduce this amendment in a previous government. So what we need to look at here is what is the reason for this being done. It appears to be the frustration of the community being able to have a say, the frustration at local members being able to do their job in this place and represent the interests of the community are something that the government no longer wants to put up with. But we need to look at what is the reality of what is happening here. We have seen that in recent years, the fight to save and then reopen the casino to Murraywimbla train line in northern New South Wales community groups has united together in an invaluable fight for the rail services in that area. And the member for Ballina is acutely aware of the negative impact that this has had and the top-down decisions have had on those Northern Rivers communities that have also faced the impact of rail closures. And she has she has asked me to specifically mention that she is opposed to this bill and is very concerned about the Liberal national power grab that is seeing cuts and closures to rail lines throughout this state. The other area where I think it is very clear that this will have an impact is in the issue of WestConnex. We know that already this arrogant roads minister, Minister Duncan Gay in the other house, has said that he is committed to building a polluting tollway that is now at a cost blowout of something in the order of $16.8 billion. And we also know that there is a heavy rail line, a rail line that is being slated under this bill for closure. That would be the closure of the inner-city rail line that runs from Balmain Road, Lilyfield to Victoria Road, Rozelle, and including the Rozelle rail yards. Now, at this point, it appears to be that this is for allegedly just the construction period of Stage 3. Let's just remind everyone in this place that Stage 3 of WestConnex is yet to be funded. It's very unclear where the money is coming from for Stage 3, but instead of looking at the idea of actually inputting and increasing the amount of freight that we would see travelling on heavy rail in our inner city communities, this government is attempting to close rail lines, close public transport options, and actually put billions of dollars into a polluting 1950s style motorway. So that's the kind of progress we're seeing from the New South Wales government. 1950s style polluting roads and the closure of actually functional transport and rail lines. I think we need to question why this government is doing this and what the agenda is, and I think we can only look as far as the Roads Minister Duncan Gay, who we know maybe has views of the archaic idea that people participate in democracy, that communities can have a say over what happens in their areas. Well, I've got news for the Roads Minister, and that is that actually that's not archaic, that's actually how democracy works. So the Roads Minister might want to be aware that in actual fact, by attempting to undermine the community's say over this, by attempting to actually bypass the parliament in this decision-making, what we are seeing is actually an undermining of democracy and a further removal of transparency for the community to be able to have a say over the decisions that affect them. We know, and we have seen, that this bill will have devastating impacts for residents across the New South Wales community, whether it be residents in Rozelle or further afield. What we know is by giving unfettered power to this minister, to this government, to be able to close rail lines, is basically yet another attempt to silence and shut down this community. It is utterly wrong to introduce a process that allows for unilateral power to close and dismantle essential rail infrastructure, even if we are not in a position to make certain rail links commercially viable now. They will be essential in future public transport needs for our city. And as we move away from a fossil fuel-based economy dominated by private motor vehicles, this will be even more essential.
No, I'm not in membership.
It is crucial that we protect our rail lines and essential that transport corridors are used and protected for future use. And we know all too well from past experience in New South Wales that once infrastructure is closed down and sold off, it disappears forever. This bill gives the government what it wants: more freedom to push through its own agenda, regardless of the will of the community. It is the reason why the Greens oppose this, and it is the reason why what is not archaic about this current debate is actually not the bill itself, it's not the attempt to do it, but it is a really, really archaic view of how transport should be dealt with in this state. And we are seeing this driven by the archaic Roads Minister Duncan Gay, when what we should be seeing is a holistic approach to the idea of public transport within our state. The question as to why we even need a roads minister when actually we should be taking an integrated approach to transport that recognises the need for not competition between private roads and public transport interests is something that continues to remain a serious question. The Greens strongly oppose this bill. We will continue to stand for the community's interest to be able to have a say by being able to be represented in this place, and to say that actually it is a fundamental principle of democracy that is being undermined here yet again by the New South Wales Baird Liberal government.